Hey there, and welcome to Undoing We, Divorce and Life Conversations on WGSN-DB Going Solo Network, radio, podcast, and TV. I'm your host, Mardi Winder Adams. I'm a divorce coach, a mediator, and someone who's been through exactly what you're going through. This show is all about helping you get through the tough stuff, the overwhelm of divorce, the what now moments, and the messiness of trying to rebuild your life. We're going to talk about real life challenges, share expert advice, and give you practical tools you can use to move forward with your life. Are you ready to start shifting from we to me? Grab a coffee, sit back, and let's get started. Hello, and welcome to Undoing We. Today, we're going to talk about something that is very serious and very real for many people, both men and women going through divorce. And this not only has a huge impact on individuals, on the adults in the relationship, but it also has a tremendous impact on children. What I'm talking about is trying to get through the court system and trying to get away from somebody who is a toxic partner. I try to avoid the word narcissist because that is a specific definition and a specific diagnosis that I am not qualified to make. And I think labeling everybody a narcissist is problematic for many different reasons. The biggest one is the court system doesn't do anything about this. And second of all, I really believe that recognizing what we've been through is important, but then understanding and moving forward from that is also important. So I have somebody on today who I've interviewed a couple of times, and she is just so real about talking about this. And I want to introduce you to Dr. Alana Sharps. She is a survivor of an extremely toxic and abusive relationship. She is a person who has come through this issue, particularly dealing with a narcissist and a person that was incredibly difficult to deal with during her divorce. And she very honestly wrote about this in her book, Was It My Fault? And I am going to recommend, if you know somebody who's in one of these extremely challenging and extremely high conflict divorce situations, get this book. Alana is a certified high conflict divorce strategist. She works with individuals who are trying to navigate the court system, both during the divorce and post-divorce.
Well, how this all came about is because I went through my own high conflict child custody battle. And when I was going through it, of course, you don't know anything about the family court system until you actually experience it. And then put high conflict on top of it, and it's an entirely new world. I felt like no one understood what I was going through. My friends and family couldn't help me because they hadn't been through the process. And I didn't think that my attorney understood all of the emotional things that were going on. I was still reliving my trauma. I had been in a narcissistic abusive relationship for 16 years. I had just gotten out of it a few months prior. And so I was still actively in my trauma and feeling traumatized. So I was utilizing my attorney as my therapist and my attorney. And I did everything wrong. Luckily for me, the outcome was good. But after the experience, I decided to educate myself on how family court operates and to become a coach to others so that they don't feel like they are alone when they're going through a similar situation.
Yes, family court is not user-friendly, and it is, I always tell clients, this is the thing that people don't understand. Attorneys are there to provide legal advice. They're not emotional support people. They don't know therapeutic techniques. They don't know coaching techniques. And a lot of attorneys really don't like the emotional side of family court. So why they're family divorce attorneys, I don't know. But that's the biggest thing I hear from attorneys is it's really hard for me to see my clients so emotional. I don't know how to deal with them.
Agreed. Yes. And that's when they hand them over to people like us, divorce coaches.
Right. And so I think something else that you said was really important is that nobody in the system seemed to understand what you were going through. Is that something you hear a lot of your clients talk about as well?
I do. And when they have the conversation with me and I say, I understand, I've been through it, it's a sense of relief that overcomes a lot of them. They actually are brought to tears in a lot of cases because they felt like they've been telling their story to so many people and no one understands.
Right.
So when they come to me and I say, I know, I understand, I've been through it, it's a sense of relief for them.
Yeah. And so I think that that's a really good distinction. If you are really concerned about child custody issues and things like that, having somebody who has some experience with that family court. Myself, when I went through my divorce, we did not have children. So it wasn't that wasn't the issue. But since then, I have worked with so many women that have had that experience. And I have been their advocate in the court system. And so I tell people, honestly, I've never been in your shoes, but I've walked with a lot of people. And then people at least know. I would like to work with, if I was going through it, honestly, and I'm saying this as a divorce coach, I would prefer to work with somebody like you, Alana, who had actually been through it rather than somebody who just worked with people who've been through it.
Right. It's a totally different experience. You know what to expect. You know how to coach your clients on what to expect, and you can mentally prepare them because I can go back to how I felt during that time, what I thought, what I was feeling. And so I can identify with the same feelings and thoughts that my clients are going through.
What do you think is the biggest block or obstacle that women face when they're talking to, let's talk about the legal professionals. And this isn't negative on lawyers, but let's just say a woman hires an attorney. She has a certain expectation what that experience is going to be. And then it's not. Where do you think the block comes in?
The block comes in realizing that you are not your attorney's only client. Family court moves very slow. Your attorneys have a number of other clients that they're attending to. So your case can go out as long as a year, 2, 3 years, or longer, depending on how much disruption the opposing party is bringing to the table. So I do a lot of coaching on realistic expectations because my clients get upset when their cases are drawn out and they don't feel like their attorneys are paying them enough attention.
Right.
They don't realize that family court is a business and their attorneys have to have a number of clients in order to sustain their business. So I have a lot of conversations about that. And then also, they don't feel that their attorney understands their feelings because, like you said, a lot of attorneys don't like to deal with the emotion. They want to stick to practicing the law because that is what their role is. And so I have to do a lot of coaching on having my clients understand that and say, if there's anything, emotional, you just need to talk something out, something happened, call me. Do not call your attorney.
Yes, because you do not bill in 6 or in 10, 6 minutes, or yes. I have attorneys that bill in 6-minute increments. I mean, so you're going to get billed for at least 12 minutes, even for them to look at a text. I shouldn't say that. Maybe some of them we just bill for 6, but there's nothing free. Everything is billable.
That's right. That's right. And if they're anything like me, like I said, I did everything wrong. I use my attorney as my therapist. So I could sit on the phone with the attorney for an hour just airing my feelings. And my attorney would let me do that.
Yeah. And you know what? I had a really good attorney. Now, this was 30 years ago, but I had a really good attorney. When the first time I met him, the last thing he said after I gave him the retainer was he said, if you have any problems, you call me. And stupid me didn't realize what that meant until I got my first bill. And, the line items, I'm looking at this, I'm going, I can't. And this was before text or even emails, like everybody just kind of phoned. So it was, everything, every piece of communication is going to be a billable something.
That is correct. Yes. Yeah. Every piece of communication. Yes. A lot of clients don't understand that email, they bill for email. So
Yes.
I tell them, I say, if you have a list of questions, prepare them for the week and send one email. Do not keep sending an email every day or multiple emails a day, because you're constantly getting billed for all of those emails.
And, I have to say, I work with quite a number of attorneys who are really good at this. And they will, in the first, month, they will realize they've got a client that needs a lot of personalized attention. And they will sit the client down and say, look, I'm your highest paid person. I've got somebody that you can work with. Here's a divorce coach. They can deal with all this stuff. And if it's a legal question, they'll tell you to get in touch with me. And so there are some really ethical attorneys that do that. Unfortunately, that's not always the case, right?
Correct. Yes.
So I know one of the things that you really work with your clients on is not to be the victim of the divorce process. And can you talk a little bit about what that is and why that's important?
Yes. Well, why it's important is because they are in a marathon. And that's one of the first things I tell my clients up front. This is not going to be a quick process. And even after you get a settlement agreement, just because of the sheer people that you are dealing with, they will continue to pull you back through the legal system multiple times. So you can have an agreement in place and then you can get something else filed against you later on, just so that person, that opposing party, can maintain control over you. Because survivors of abuse is a control tactic that's constantly being used against them. So I work with them on building their self-esteem, the importance of self-care, and also having a therapist. And I always recommend a trauma therapist because, again, as survivors of abuse, you're probably experiencing trauma. So I highly recommend them finding a trauma therapist as a part of the team as well.
That's really excellent advice. And you're so right about, the research that talks about the post-traumatic stress disorder that so many women or men who have been in abusive relationships may experience for years. And you're right. The way the family court is set up, frivolous cases just are right, left, and center every time you turn around. And what about do you ever see a lot of your clients where there's a real financial imbalance and, the person with the most money can keep dragging you back to court? Is that something you experience?
I do. Financial abuse and legal abuse.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of times, stay-at-home moms that have left the relationship, the opposing party will withhold funds. So they're not getting post-separation support until their divorce is finalized, and they have to fight for that. Or the person that makes more money, the opposing party, is continuing to drag them through the legal system, running up their financial bills. In some instances, running them down to the point that they can barely live off of the money that they have left.
Right. And, it's funny because I think some of the family courts and some of the legal abuse advocacy groups that are out there now are really starting to ramp up to provide education to judges, attorneys, CASA, guardian ad litems, like you name it, the whole kind of divorce community, to say these are the signs of this legal abuse and what's going on. And I was just reading an article where a judge had actually gone after, I think this woman had been to court. It was either 60 or 70 times. And she was working 3 jobs just to pay her legal fees. It was crazy. And the judge went back. They finally got a judge that had, kind of was willing to go back and look at this. She got all of her legal fees, over those 60 appearances. She got not all of them, but a large percentage of them in a lump sum order through that judge. She said, look, I see a pattern. This is what's happening. This is my judgment. And so I think a few cases like that are going to change a little bit about how this is done.
I hope so. Because I've seen a lot of women have to go pro se because they simply can't afford attorneys anymore.
Right. And now one of the things that you said you work with your clients on is self-esteem and building up that sense of who they are and their capabilities. Interestingly, you said pro bono, because I think pro se, because I think a lot of groups now are supporting women in getting that legal knowledge to be able to do that.
Yes. Yep, so that they can understand the court system and educate themselves. I actually had a client, she is my biggest success story. I tell people this story all the time. She started out with attorneys and she got to the point once again where she could no longer afford the legal fees. And so she had to go pro se. And she learned the legal system. She started writing up her own documentation, went to the courthouse, got the documents she needed to file, filled them out, and found an attorney that would just review her documentation.
Right.
And so she would get the blessing from the attorney, and then she represented herself in court. She even cross-examined witnesses and won her case.
That is fantastic.
I was so proud of her because when she first came to me, every conversation we had, she was in tears. She didn't understand what was going on. She was very traumatized. So to see her go from that to the point that she could be her own attorney, cross-examine witnesses, and win her case, it was a huge transformation. I was so proud of her. I just checked in with her not too long ago. This has been 2 years since we met. And she said, Alana, I'm doing great. I got a promotion at my job and I'm engaged to be married.
Oh, wonderful. I love stories like that. Alana, that is the most, as a coach, you're like, all right.
Yeah. I told her, I said, you are my biggest success story. I tell everybody your story.
That is so powerful. And I think, the thing is, it's an uphill climb and it's a very steep learning curve. But there is a logic to the family court system. If you get into it and you really take the time to understand what's going on.
And that's the biggest thing. Yes, take the time to understand what's going on and how it works. It's not logical. I tell people that all the time. What you think the court should care about, they don't care about because they're focused on the law and facts.
Right. Right. And I think a little bit too, I think the whole idea of what family court is portrayed in the movies and on TV is so bizarre compared to what it really is, that people just, like you said, they just have these completely unrealistic expectations. I had a client who assumed that they were going to take like several days to hear her divorce case. I said, you're going to get 10 minutes in front of the judge and both of you are going to have to do this in 10 minutes because, they just, like you say, they just want to know the very basics, unless there's something really bizarre going on, Yeah.
Yes. And you can't go in there and say, I want 80% custody of the child because I think that my ex is going to abuse him. No one will listen to you. It's not how it works.
And there, I always think there's a good and a bad to that, because you shouldn't be able to accuse somebody of something they might do just because you've got a bad impression of them. On the other hand, abusers are very crafty and they're very secretive and they're very, nobody goes out and hits their spouse or partner in the middle of a Walmart parking lot. They do it in their own home behind closed doors where there are no witnesses. So it's so hard to know how to handle some of those situations. So you have written a book. Can you tell us a little bit about your book, please?
Yes. So my book actually started out as therapeutic journals for me. After I left my marriage, I had so much information in my head that I had to let out, that I just started writing my story from beginning to end, from when I first started dating my ex all the way up until the day that I left him. And as I started sharing my story with others, I had a lot of men and women asking me, how did I get out? And the steps that I took to heal once I got out of the relationship, because they had either been through it themselves or had a friend or family member who was currently going through it that they were trying to support.
And so when you were doing that, was that hard? Was that a hard process to write that stuff down and then share it publicly?
Very much so. I didn't realize at the time when I decided to publish my book how difficult that was going to be on me mentally, because going through the editing process, and you don't edit just one time, you go through multiple iterations of editing. So every time I had to read my story, I was re-traumatizing myself because I was reliving every instance of abuse. And I didn't expect that when I wrote the book. And so it was very difficult. It was very difficult to write, very difficult for me to edit. When we were finally done, I was relieved. But what kept me going was I knew that my story would help others. And I wanted to get it out there because at the time that I published, you didn't have a lot of people actually telling you what goes on behind closed doors. You had a lot of people touching on the surface, but they weren't saying exactly what was occurring behind closed doors of these people that are very charismatic and have the perfect image of husband, wife, parent. They're not like that behind closed doors. So I knew I had to get my story out there. And I told it very raw, detail for detail, so that people could identify with it. And a lot of people have.
So we went over a lot of information about some of the things that people going through these high conflict divorces really have to think about. And so I want to highlight a couple of the points that Dr. Sharps made, but also that we had a conversation around. And I really want to stress that although we talk about attorneys and what people should and shouldn't be doing, there's nothing wrong with an attorney doing their job and providing you legal services. You wouldn't go to your therapist for legal advice, so you don't want to go to your attorney for therapeutic help. And you don't want to be spending time with professionals where you are spending the most amount of money and getting the least amount of support for the specific issue. And that's where a divorce coach really can come in handy, because we have some of those skills. We can help you through navigate a lot of this stuff. And as you see in listening to, as you hear in listening to Dr. Sharps, she works a lot with her clients, specifically dealing with the same issues through the court system, issues of legal abuse that she had to deal with. So let's go through some of the big points that I think are important to just really focus in on from our conversation. The first thing, and I think that this is so critical, is you need to have somebody that has training in how to deal with these high conflict divorces. And as I said, I did not go through a narcissistic, abusive type of relationship in my divorce, but I worked as a domestic violence client advocate for 7 years. And I walked with clients on a daily basis, trying to get out of some of these situations. So working with somebody like Dr. Sharps, on the other hand, who has actually experienced the court system, dealt with a toxic partner, helped her kids through this process, learned how to be her own best advocate in court, and then also went and did additional training to get certified, really provides that very comprehensive perspective. So you want to make sure that you are relying on professionals that have some kind of background. And that's a really good question to ask when you are hiring a divorce coach, an attorney, a therapist, whoever you may be looking for that kind of emotional support. Which leads us to point number 2. The family court system is not set up to be user-friendly. The family court system is set up to be an adversarial system. It's us against them. It's me against him or her. And even though the courts say things like we are here in the best interests of the children, and I believe that they really are, there's still so much stuff that doesn't get addressed in the court. So I think it's really important to, again, utilize the right professionals for the right tools, and don't have an unrealistic expectation of what you're going to get out of the family court system. You're not going to get the warm and fuzzies. You're not going to get the judge telling you that you are right and they are wrong. So that leads into point 3. We really do need to manage expectations. If you have a high conflict partner, you are going to have a high conflict divorce. There's just no way that that's not going to happen. But by understanding and recognizing my divorce is not going to be over in 3 months, like my neighbor's divorce was. And my high conflict partner is not going to be willing to negotiate or work from a a fairness scale. They are going to inflict as much pain and discomfort through the court system as they possibly can, which often includes legal abuse. And we talked about that. And legal abuse is really becoming recognized now. It is a way for the person, typically the person with money, to be able to keep dragging the other person back into court for modifications years after the divorce has been finalized. Again, having the ability to recognize this is the situation I'm in helps you manage those expectations and maybe helps you think of some long-term effective strategies to help reduce some of this stuff. And the good news is more and more court systems are becoming aware of this, particularly if you see the same judge on a regular basis. This is where sometimes being in a smaller system where the same judge hears the cases really can help you because they can start to see the pattern of what's going on. And the last point that Dr. Sharps made, and that I think this is one of the highlights of Alana's book and of the work she does with clients, is that you can become educated. You can become empowered through this process. So you need to have somebody to support you and to walk with you, and somebody that understands the basics. And I think even if all they understand is the basics of a high conflict situation, you're going to be farther ahead than working with people who don't recognize there's a problem or don't want to admit that there's a problem with the partner. And I think the other thing is that with education and empowerment, it may become possible for people to do pro se work, in other words, representing themselves through especially the post-litigation motions, if they're just being filed as nuisance kind of cases. It may be possible to represent yourself, or, as Alana talked about, learning how to do some of the stuff, the forms, filling them in, getting them checked, and then having an attorney actually just review your work so that any errors or omissions or problems are caught quickly, can really save you a lot of money. It can save you a lot of stress. It can save you a lot of time. And it does help you build your self-confidence, and it does help you feel empowered when you can take control of your life in these very difficult divorce situations. Thanks for sharing your time with me on Undoing We. If this episode resonated with you, be sure to share it with a friend, and don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. If you're looking for some more support, be sure to grab my guide, 5 Strategies for Better Communication During Divorce and Other Life Transitions. The link is going to be in the show notes. And remember, no matter what you do today, do something special for yourself, because you deserve it.